being restructured from a job is not something that we necessarily ask for. The choice is made by the organization. Honest to God, I felt like this was the universe opening up and giving me the opportunity to try something new.
Welcome to Happy Accidents. I am thrilled today to be chatting with our guest, Michelle Schafer, who is a coach whose career path has thrived on two of the most powerful forces there are: chance and choice. After experiencing two different major restructurings, Michelle took that unexpected disruption and she's turned it into a fulfilling coaching practice where she helps others navigate transitions and lead with purpose. She is recognized as one of Ottawa's top career coaches. She writes widely, she volunteers her time, and she released her first book this past January. Michelle, welcome to the Happy Accidents podcast.
Thank you so much, Dennis. So excited to be with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. You and your journey. I know we've talked a bit offline, so I'm excited for the audience to get to hear a little bit more about you and how serendipity or unexpected events have played a role, and the advice that you have for people. So let's start off with this whole being restructured twice thing with you. I think the first time it was banking was the industry you're in,
Yes.
and then not for profit. So both times you took two entirely different paths. So how did that happen? What were the mindsets or the small steps that helped you to go from feeling stuck or disappointed to embracing brand new opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great question. And, it's really interesting as a career transition coach, when you ask other career coaches, how they got into coaching, oftentimes it was through career transition themselves and being restructured. I know a good friend of mine was restructured 7 times before
Goodness.
becoming a coach, which is crazy. But when I look back at, certainly my first restructure and recognizing that being restructured from a job is not something that we necessarily ask for. It's, our leaving one job and moving on to something else in those instances is not our choice. The choice is made by the organization. And, when I look at my very first career transition, and I was with TD Bank for 18 years and was restructured because of a merger and acquisition. So I'm going to date myself. TD Bank and Canada Trust merged, and my job was eliminated among like thousands of others. And it was really interesting. Being in financial services, I was working for an organization that believed in bottom lines as like a profit. It was numbers driven. And when I left that role, I realized that I didn't want to be part of an organization where a bottom line was profit. I really wanted to be part of a bottom line that was people. So, it was that first step, I guess, in that transition that really had to do with reflection, Dennis. Like it was reflecting on what was really important to me at that stage in life. And I realized, I was somebody who loved to volunteer. I believe very much in giving back. And so that first transition for me was moving from financial services to not for profit. And there was a book that I read, maybe Serendipitous Experience number one, when I was still employed by TD Bank. I remember being on a flight for a learning and development conference. And I was reading a magazine that promoted this book, and it was called Answering Your Call by John Schuster. And even though I hadn't been restructured then, I was already thinking about maybe next steps and not being in banking for the rest of my life. And reading that book really shifted things because it caused me to think about what my calls were, that I had a deep call to volunteering. And that was, I'd say, the first clue to making a big shift. I could have just continued in financial services, but I didn't. And that reflection carried on to restructure number two. I'd say that's a foundational element in making any shift in life is realizing what's important to you at that stage and intentionally aligning your choices to that.
And sometimes I guess we have to be jolted out of that. And especially in your first career, I find, because
Mm.
for me anyway, there's so much to learn. You're learning the corporate lingo. You're learning how to get along with teams. You're learning how to be good at your job and how to reach goals. And it's all fresh and it's all new. And and that's kind of exciting. And then it takes something like a layoff to go, yeah, but is this really what I want to be doing with my life? You kind of get lulled into
Yeah,
this sense of the day to day. So in some
easily.
senses, it can be a bit of a blessing in disguise that, boy, what would have happened if I just continued down that road, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think about that every once in a while, and I think because I already was starting to think that I
Mm.
didn't want to be associated with the profit-driven world. I remember reading that book, Answering Your Call, a good year before I was
Mm.
restructured. And I
So the
remember
seed
when I
was
was
planted
reading
already.
the signs were there, right?
Yep.
And I remember thinking, you know what? Like, I'm not necessarily going to resign today. But when the opportunity presents itself, I think I'm going to want to move into not for profit. And then it was within that same year, that same 12 months where
Right.
the decision was made for me, and it really helped to pivot things and point in a new
Yeah.
direction. So yeah, those things, you're right. They're in the moment, it can be really hard to recognize that it's a gift to be
Yeah.
given that opportunity to start something new. And yet I see it time and time again, like not just with myself, but with my clients. And it's such a cliche, and yet it's so true. Like where one door closes, there's something else that opens entirely. And
Yeah.
I remember when I was restructured, I was given an opportunity to stay at the time in financial services. There were a few other jobs that were available to me. And I remember speaking to, she was a former leader of mine and she was a mentor of mine. And she really helped me navigate and negotiate something different, like basically negotiate an exit so that I could
Oh,
try
wow.
something new.
Yeah.
So, had it not been for her, had it not been for that opportunity, I think eventually I would have left, but this certainly sped up the process quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm assuming when you were first kind of having those thoughts go through your head, like, hey, I'm not sure if I want to stay in this profit-driven industry. And if another
Yeah.
opportunity comes along, I'm assuming you were thinking, wow, a great opportunity might land in my lap and I can go for it. You never envisioned, well, I might get laid off someday, and that would be the
And then
opportunity, right?
that just, yeah, that became the gift and the
Yeah.
opportunity, right? And and it's funny, like when I was navigating that shift, because it really involved a whole reinvention. Like, and when you move from one sector to another, you have to reposition yourself, you have to market yourself in a different
Yep.
way. Like I remember having to completely rewrite my resume, like transform it from a chronological resume to more of a skills driven resume.
Yep.
All of those things need to be done. Like it was just completely different to reinvent
Right.
yourself. And yet that was the best thing that happened really in the
Yep.
end. I
Yep.
look back and I don't regret that move at all. Like,
Right.
and yet the restructure was uncomfortable, but what came from it was such reward in the end, which is
Yeah.
hard to acknowledge when it's all going on.
Right. Right. So it's kind of funny because you talk about reading that book and that
Yeah.
kind of planted the seed. The seed was there, it was in the background, but it took the layoff to really take the leap. We've
Yeah.
talked before about how it was a discussion you had with a friend, I believe, that kind of planted the seed. Maybe you should go into coaching. Can you tell us a little bit
Yes.
about what happened there?
Yeah, that too is just like one of those, moments. You can't even say necessarily they're random because I really do believe that everything happens for a reason at certain times. But yeah, after I left financial services, got in a not for profit, I was working for a large national cancer organization. And while I was with that organization, I was probably about a good 6 years in. I happened to just be out one day with a friend, and she's a very good friend of mine. My friend Val, she is a coach, and she just said to me, it was, for me, it felt kind of out of the blue, but obviously it
Right.
was something that she was holding on to for a while. And she said to me, I never understood why you didn't get into coaching as a career. And at the time, I was working for this organization that, really was at the root of a cause that I believe very strongly in. I mean, I've had cancer in my family.
Mm.
I was supporting like volunteers who were volunteering for the organization. Everybody had a reason for being there. And I remember saying to her, I said, you know what? Like that's interesting, but right now I love my job. I had negotiated a 5 day a week job to 3 days a week so I could be at home with my young kids. I was working with these volunteers that had a deep connection to the cancer cause. I said, why do I want to make a change? Like I like everything is going the
Yeah.
way that I need it to go. And yet, about a year seems to be the time when things happen, right? It was like I read the book and then a year later I
Yeah.
was restructured. Well,
Yeah.
my friend planted the seed. A year later, I learned that I was going to be losing my job at this cancer organization. And it was like something like I never forgot what she said to me, because the reality was I was always coaching in all of my jobs, but I
Right.
I say it was like small C coaching. It was like off the corner of my desk coaching. It was a small part of my job.
Yeah.
But this was an opportunity to coach with a capital C, like with
Yeah.
like education and a process behind you. So
Yeah.
at the time I found out I was losing my job, I remembered what my friend said. And honest to
Yeah.
God, I felt like this was the universe opening up and giving me the opportunity to try something new. And so I started networking. I started networking for work because, I still wanted to continue my work, obviously. But I started networking with coaches on the side to find out, why do they coach? What do they coach? Because there's a coach, there's like parenting coaches, financial coaches, fitness coaches, career coaches, leadership coaches. Like I was interested in knowing all the different applications and just learning a little bit more about it. And I realized through networking with coaches that this is something I don't want to do off the side of my desk. This is something I want to do more intentionally, more fully. And
Right.
so I went and got a first level of certification, and started the process to start my own business.
It's interesting that in both cases the seed was planted, but not immediately, like a
Yeah.
year or so's time before. Do you think it would have turned out different had it been more immediate? Like there wasn't enough time for it to kind of marinate and sit in your mind and really think about it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, kind of like my move to not for profit. I think it would have happened eventually, but it may not have happened right then. And I think, in both cases, and I would say this is true for a lot of transition, that you do need some time to really think about it and process it and really evaluate it against what's really important to you at that stage in your life. So, like, if the coaching seed was planted in my 20s, I would say that would have taken a long, long time to come to fruition because I wouldn't have been seeing it then at all. It really wouldn't have lined up at that time with what was important to you. I mean, if I think of my 20s, I was a bit more interested in climbing the ladder. I did a lot of travel for work. I was interested in promotions. I also had no kids or no partner. It was
Yeah.
just me where now fast forward to now, I've got two kids. I've got a partner who's my biggest cheerleader. Like I'm not interested in traveling and living out of a suitcase all the time or following a promotional ladder. Like my intentions, my motivations are different. So I think the seed was planted in both cases at the right time for then to give it enough time to really sit for me to be with it, even unconsciously. Like, I mean, I would say in both cases, these were not things I was actively thinking about every single day. But then when there were different things happening in my life, both of those seeds played a more active role.
Yeah.
So yeah, timing is a lot of it too.
It's funny. I was just chatting with somebody the other day about how if you look at a really unexpected happy accident, a lot of
Yeah,
things have to align for that to happen. But if you look at a really unexpected tragedy, very
yeah,
similar. A lot of bad things have to align
for
in order
sure.
for that tragedy to unfold. Very similar. One turns out in a very positive way, one turns out in a very negative way. As you just
Yeah,
described, you had to be in the right time, you had to be in the right place. You had to have the seed planted at the right time. You had to have these layoffs happen around that time. Everything kind
yeah.
of combined in the right for you to go, I'm going to go down this path. Otherwise, you never probably would have even considered either of those other two paths.
No, and I think you share something really important there too, Dennis, which is like something that can be really uncomfortable can lead to something that's really powerful. And, like it can be a really negative experience, certainly. And I mean, I work with a lot of clients who are completely blindsided by their
Yeah.
job loss, and they do experience, because it is a loss, for some people very profound. Like there's a grieving process,
Yeah.
there's grief that goes with that. And so it's like you can't even think about the gift and all of that. Like there's no gift when something like that happens in the
Yeah.
moment
Right.
based on how you feel. And yet, when we start to take those steps forward, there could be some things that just become clearer for us. And
Yeah.
and with the coaching, it was really interesting because as much as my friend planted the seed, there was also like conversations that I had that just locked it into place. Like I remember when I was actively networking with coaches just to find out more about coaching and all of that. The last person that I end up networking with turned out to be the teacher for my first level of coaching certification, if you can believe
Wow.
that. But she said something to me that like just like landed in me, and it was so grounding. And while we were talking about coaching and I was asking her questions, and she kind of leaned back and she looked at me and she said, "You don't need anybody to validate this for you. Like, you know what you want to do, and you know that this is meant for you." And I looked at her and I said, "I think you're right." And I was active. I realized that as much as, yes, I was gathering information, but I was looking for people to give me the check mark. Like, yes, this is something that you should do. And I didn't need that.
Yeah.
It was part of me. It was,
Yeah.
I just didn't realize it. So, I think with these accidents, having people in your supportive network that can be objective observers, that can maybe help you see things that you're not seeing for yourself, can be really instrumental on your path for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about your coaching then. So when I know right now you do a combination of career coaching for people who are in that, but you also do leadership coaching. Did you start with one of them and then add the second one on?
I did. So I started with career coaching, like with a specialty in career transition, mainly because I had had that experience twice,
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
been
Yep.
restructured. I know the importance of having a conversation partner to not only help you process the emotional side of losing your job and moving on, but
Yeah.
also to, help you with that roadmap and those
Yeah.
tactical pieces to move forward, like resume, interview prep, all of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So I started with that for about 2 years. And then I added leadership coaching. And, with the reasoning being that, if you take any leadership issue or concern or goal for development, you can strip everything down, oftentimes to be one of two things. Either it comes down to a relationship or it comes down to communication in some way. And so in my coaching, I'm actually trained as a life coach. I've just chosen to apply it in the career space.
Right.
So I was taking that life coaching basis and that foundation and applying it to leadership, like helping leaders navigate some really hard conversations with team members, or managing up to their own leader, helping them with, like delivering tough messages, helping them with performance assessments and feedback, and having a stronger relationship with a stakeholder or peer. All of those things came from my coaching background that I was then able to apply to leadership. So
Yeah.
I like to
That's
think of
amazing.
them as like unique specialties that I
Yep.
wear both hats simultaneously.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's no coincidence for me that some of the best leaders I've worked with or for were also amazing communicators. And then on the other
Yes.
side, some of the worst leaders I've worked with or for were terrible communicators. They might be
Oh,
super
yeah.
smart, they might be great at strategy, but if they can't communicate it, if they can't build those relationships, they're not
No.
effective in their leadership roles. So,
Well, and the interesting thing that I'm seeing now, and I would say I've become really aware of this in the last couple of years, is where leadership meets career transition. And there is
mm,
a place where the two of them directly intersect because if you think back to what you just shared, Dennis, like knowing those leaders that, yeah, they weren't really great communicators. They weren't really like showing their humanity at work. Like it was all about the deliverables and the strategy and stuff.
Yeah.
What's happening is people leave leaders, they usually don't leave their job. And when they're leaving leaders, they're leaving the organization that brings on these leaders. It's all part of the culture of the organization. So like I'm seeing that happen where leadership development is becoming more important as a retention issue. I mean, if
Yeah.
if an organization has a revolving door, they don't need to look any further than their leadership. It is a
Yeah.
leadership problem. And so it is kind of neat to see just where the two intersect now.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So the people you're working with, both
Yeah.
leaders and people in career transition, and I guess for the people watching or listening here to the podcast, what are some of the things that you can advise them on? How do they harness those unexpected opportunities? How do they stay open to serendipity and things like that in their life?
Yeah. And that's such a great question because, I think the pace of our lives oftentimes doesn't allow for space, right? For a lot of thinking and processing. Like we're an action-driven society, So when something like a job loss happens, the very first thought that oftentimes people have is, oh my gosh, I have to start applying. I have to do something. And yet, that isn't going to get you to a place where you are going to be open to other possibilities. What it will get you to is the fast path to discouragement and frustration, because what will
Right.
happen is you're going to plaster the market with resumes. None of them are going to stick because right now, over 1,000 people are applying for any given job. And you're just going to apply to the same stuff because you're
Yeah.
comfortable with that. You know where to look for that. So to be truly open, I like to say to people, you need to hit the pause button. And, in my book, I have a chapter that is called that. It's really around, really just slow down the process, slow down the conversation and do some reflection. And, I'll encourage people to reflect on, I mean, really like there's three core questions that I find just tend to open things up a little bit more. One is, what is the work, if you're really being honest with yourself, that really fires you up and gives you energy? That is different than the work that you can do that people come to you on that drains your energy. So really focusing in on what gives me a lift? What do I want to do more of? You want to take stock of that, number one. That would be like the first key to career fulfillment. The second is reflect on what is the kind of organization where I can do my best work, an organization that believes what I believe in. So, what is their mandate? What is their values? What kind of leaders do they employ? What kind of team members do they employ? So, everything to do with the organization and the environment is key, number two. Number three is what are my non-negotiables? Like, what are my deal breakers? What are the things that are so deeply important to me that I would walk away from an opportunity if they weren't there? And what I'll say to people is, for fun, map all of those things up against what you just left. That oftentimes is illuminating and will prevent people from just going to do the same thing
Yeah.
because they realize, oh, you know what? Like, even though I was good at certain things, there were certain things that I didn't really like. I don't want to do that anymore. Or they might realize, okay, like I left an organization where me and the leader just did not see eye to eye. The values of the organization no longer aligned with mine. I'd be looking for a different kind of organization, which for some people like me, like means a whole other sector to align better with your values. So
Yeah.
how to stay open to those things are take the step back, reflect on those three things, and now then you can start to intentionally seek out those things, talking to other people to explore possibilities. We'll call it networking here, but really it's research through conversation. That's actually
Yeah.
what networking is, just having
Yeah.
conversations. You can learn so much just by being open to talking to other people, learning about their experience, learning and seeing what might be available to you, or even as a quick hack. This is my favorite recent hack is, we talk about AI, it's all over the airwaves, right? Like, how can AI support you? It can support you in a career exploration. So, even for fun, if you were to feed your reflections on those three questions that I just gave out, plus your resume, minus anything identifiable like your name, your phone number, any of that kind of stuff. And ask ChatGPT what career paths are open to me based on my preferences and my experiences. And you might be astounded to find out the different kind of paths that are available to you based on your own skills and your own experience. It just widens the view considerably.
I love that you advise people take a pause and then be very
Yeah.
intentional. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so so here's a scenario and a question for you. A
Yeah.
few years ago, uh I decided my dream vehicle, don't judge me here, my dream vehicle would be, I want to buy a Jeep Wrangler. I always
Oh,
wanted one ever
wow.
since I was a teenager, never had one. So I did. I went out and bought one. I bought myself a Jeep Wrangler. Suddenly, I started noticing Jeep Wranglers everywhere. Probably just because I own one now and
That's
it's top of
hilarious.
mind, right? But as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, these people that had just got laid off, what's top of mind is the job they just came from. What's
Yeah.
top of mind is what they're comfortable with, so those would be the opportunities that they would see. Not that the other ones weren't
Yeah.
there, they just weren't recognizing and they weren't top of mind. But if they take a step back and let me be much more intentional about what
Yeah.
I really want, what I want, and what I need, and what's going to make me happy and what I'm going to thrive in.
Yeah.
Suddenly, they're going to recognize those opportunities. They were probably always there, but they never
Mhm.
would have given them a second thought until now that they've been intentional. They're top of mind, and they're going to see those opportunities more readily. Like I was seeing Jeep Wranglers everywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just, when we slow everything down, it creates that space, like you mentioned before, like to be able to look at other things. And, I'll add to that there are some individuals certainly that when they lose their job, they don't have a lot of time to reflect. Like the pressure is on. Maybe they're supporting other people in their house. They might be a single parent. They might just, I mean, got like maybe like houses or, with mortgages and,
Yep.
apartments with rent to pay and things like that. There may be some of your listeners that say, but Michelle, I don't have the time to do that. I need to go and find something else. And so what I'll offer to people is, career transition can be multi-layered. So you don't have to make it all or nothing, meaning I have to find the perfect job or I won't settle for anything else. Well, what we can do is maybe we need to find something that isn't the best fit initially, but it does pay the bills and it relieves some of the financial pressure.
Yes.
But I'll say to those clients, commit to yourself how long you want to be able to stay in that job. Like, commit to yourself that this is not your forever place, that you will continue looking for work on the side for something that is a better fit. And so then that way you can satisfy both just over maybe a longer period of time. You can relieve the financial pressure more immediately, but you can also still have your eye on what's important to me, build out a plan to help you intentionally find that out. And on the side, which means it's going to happen a bit slower, but that's okay, you can still find that down the road. And there's no shame in that. Like, there's no
Yeah.
shame in starting a job and 6 months later resigning that job in favor for something else. Sometimes we convince ourselves that it's way worse, like, oh, I can't do that because I've only been there for 6 months. And I'll say to people,
Right.
who's driving the bus on your career? Is anybody
Right.
else going to drive the bus?
Yeah.
Well, of course not.
Yeah.
This is your
And,
opportunity.
and these are also
Um,
people who maybe have just been laid off by a company, and yet they're still sticking to the loyalty card. Like, come on, it works both ways, right? So,
Yeah, totally. So,
yeah.
it's all about, when you know what's important to you, you build a plan. And when I say to people about their plan, a lot of people will still subscribe to the single plan of looking online, which
Right.
is going to cause you to miss out on so many different opportunities. So,
Yeah.
the research through conversation that I mentioned before is I'm going to say 80% of a job search. Like so many opportunities are not posted. You can find out about different possibilities, different career paths just simply by talking to people. And you can actually realize that maybe what you thought was going to be a good fit isn't in the end. Kind of like, maybe the Jeep Wrangler, maybe there's another car for me, but you won't know until you start talking to people.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in transition from the banking world into not for profit, I had a number of people, all very well meaning, say, you should be a fundraiser. Like they say, you're great with people. You'd be an amazing person to like raise money for a cause, even though I had never done sales of any kind, even in the
Hmm.
banking world. And I said, I don't know. I mean, part of it resonates, but how I realized that fundraising was not for me was by talking to people in fundraising who did events, who did major gifts, who did grant writing, like all
Yeah.
the areas of fundraising. I talked to different people in those areas and I realized, you know what? Like, yeah, I mean, I very much admire that work, and yet that wasn't a fit for me. If I take those, reflections to those three questions and hold it up against fundraising roles, there were big disconnects. There was some alignment, but not a lot. So,
Right.
do the research, have the conversations and reach out to people who maybe you think, oh, how's that person going to help me? Every conversation has like some like
Yeah.
grain of sand that will
Yes.
help you in your search.
Yep.
But you just need
There's
to be
always
open to
something to
having it.
learn from everybody, right? So
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
so a bit of a left turn here.
Yeah.
The other thing I really love about you is, well, anybody watching on YouTube right now can see the sign on the wall behind you that says "Find joy in the journey." If you're
Yes.
listening, she's got this on her wall. The other thing that you do, I know you have a thing called a sunshine file. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what this is and how it works?
Yeah, I mean, and it's something I mean, I think I encourage, all of us, to have one of our own, but certainly with my clients in career transition, I encourage them to have one. And really, like, what a sunshine file is yeah, just keep a running log of your achievements, of things that you do for your organization or even in your volunteer work that, has, brought some results, that has brought some kind of positive change or impact. And the reason why I encourage people to do that, even as they find their next job, I say, start with that, like right away, keep that
Yeah, keep it
going all
going.
year round, is because change has a way of happening. Though those moments that, we've talked about that sometimes come out of nowhere that are meaningful in some way. We always want to be ready. And so, even for people when they find a new job, I say keep track of the impact that you're making in your new job and keep your resume and your LinkedIn profile always updated with those things, because what you don't want to have happen is, so let's say you don't keep a sunshine file and you're in a job for about 10 years and maybe there's a big change. Either you decide to resign or maybe there's a restructure and you have to reconstruct your resume. Well, when you haven't done anything to it in 10 years, it's a lot to put
Yeah.
together. Even if it's been 2 years, it's a lot to put together. So
Yeah.
always keep that as something that's just
So
kind of
what
like
are the
open on your
types of
desktop.
things that what are the types of things that people should be keeping track of and keeping in their sunshine file?
I would say, I mean, like, let's say you created and implemented a process that ended up saving your coworkers or yourself some time. Maybe you
Right.
created a new filing system. Maybe you launched a project. Maybe you had an idea for a project that then got implemented. Maybe you saved your organization like $10,000 based on an idea that you had.
Right.
Maybe you created a new process as a leader to have like some fun team building activity once a month, and that increased engagement and increased retention. Any of those things, basically anything that you do that has had a positive impact on
Yeah.
individuals, on stakeholders, on clients, those are all great things and great
Yeah.
additions for your file.
Yeah. Probably an amazing thing for somebody to go and look back on, especially after a layoff, just to boost their own confidence and go,
Yeah.
yeah, look what I have done. Look what I do
Absolutely.
contribute. Look at the value I bring. Look at the skills look at the things I've accomplished. That's got to be so good for their confidence after such a, you know, demoralizing, low, confidence experience like a layoff.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'll add to that. What I see in some of my clients, especially when it's really hard processing of their loss, like they didn't see it coming, or it happened in a way that was terrible. Like some of my clients go into a meeting thinking they're there to talk about their performance review, and they leave with no job. Like it's just like, different approaches. So,
Yeah.
especially for those individuals, what happens is they tend to forget all of the good of what they've done. They feel that at the moment that they were let go, that all of what happened before was erased, that none of it matters, that none of it
Right.
provided any impact. And so it's easy to get detached from all that and forget about our own value. And I'll
Yeah.
remind people that yes, at the moment you were told that you had no job, the reality was, yeah, you were exited from the organization. You need to find something new. But what they can't take away from you is all of what you did before that.
Yeah.
And so it can be really hard for people to get reconnected to that. So yeah, having that kind of, like that kind of file, that kind of ongoing way of capturing our achievements and the results that we get is a great way to be a motivator,
Yeah.
especially in a
Yeah.
time of
Love
loss.
that. Love that strategy. I love how it works for both looking ahead and being able to look back and remember, right? So,
Totally.
and your journey, man. So you've reinvented yourself a few times, right?
Yeah.
Go from banking to not for profit to coaching, now author. Let's talk about that experience and your book. So you launched it January of this year. Do you have a copy with you there?
I do. Here,
Okay, let's hold it up again for
there we
anybody
go.
on
We'll hold it
YouTube
up for
watching.
everybody. It's called
There,
Cultivating Career Growth, Navigating Transitions with Purpose.
love it,
And
love it.
I'm excited to share now. I just found out a few weeks ago that my book won an award, actually. It's
What?
won an International Impact Book Award.
Wow,
And so I'm very, very excited about that. It placed first in my category, which was career change and reinvention.
love it.
And
Congrats.
it's interesting, when you talk about, yeah, we're talking about reinvention. I wouldn't have thought that I would have written a book for the longest time. I mean, I remember years ago, my partner, who I mentioned is probably my biggest cheerleader. He
Hmm.
he's been encouraging me to write a book for a while, and he thinks I've got a couple of them in me. I think for right now, one is maybe where I'll stop for now, but never say
Right.
never,
Let that
right? Because
soak
you
in a
never
bit.
know what'll
Yeah.
happen. But at the time, I just thought, what do I have to put in a whole book? Like I do a lot of writing on LinkedIn, but as you know, Dennis, those posts are meant
Yes.
to be shorter,
Yeah.
and I'll write articles, but they're short too. I mean, this is a whole book. And
Yeah.
maybe another serendipitous moment. I mean, there had been publishers reaching out to me dating back to probably at least 3 years ago. And I ignored all of their requests for conversations because I thought, I'm not going to do this. I don't think I have time. I don't think I have what it takes to be an author, like all of these reasons, right? And it was about it was about like 2 years ago now. Maybe not quite that much, but this individual, Larissa, who's from Next Page Publishing, so she, turned out to be my publisher, but at the time, she reached out, and there was just something about how she reached out. I thought, you know what? I shouldn't be so close minded. I should open up the conversation, do my research, and
Yeah.
just see where it goes. And I mean,
Yeah.
after talking to her, I realized, you know what? I can do this, and I want to do it with her. And
Yeah.
so
Love it.
she could have been one of the ones that I just said,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to take your call. But I
Yeah.
did. And I think that was the universe telling me it's time. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
love it. So every single time there's these little seeds planted, and maybe not right away, like you said, maybe your partner was telling you should write a book, and for a while you're like, "What are you talking about? That's not happening."
Yeah.
But eventually, that seed gets watered and fruit starts to bear. So let's
Yeah.
let's talk a bit about your book then. So it's there to help support people in career exploration, strategic
Yeah.
job search. What are readers finding when they start really getting in and digging into your book?
The biggest thing I hear from people, well, I mean, there's two things. One is for individuals who go on to work with me, or they've worked with me and then read my book, they say my voice comes through like
Mm,
I'm talking to them.
right.
So I feel really grateful for that feedback because that
Yeah.
tells me that the me, the authentic me is coming
Yeah.
through in my writing. But the biggest thing I hear from people is just that it's a system, it's a roadmap, because I go through systematically, here's where you start, hitting the pause button, doing the reflection, gaining some clarity, then building a plan, and then all the tactical stuff like the resume, the interview, all that kind of stuff that goes with it. So they feel it's a really good roadmap to help them find their next job, but it's also part workbook. So it's a strategy book. So I share tips and resources. I also tell client stories through the book. So a few people have said, I've seen myself in the story that you tell about this person. But because it's part workbook, I'm intentionally leaving spaces for people to make their notes. So then
Love
by
it.
the end of the book, they've built out their job search strategy and their
Uh,
plan with all of their reflection notes. And people have
yeah.
told me that that's really helpful.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. There's so many times I've read a book and thought, wow, that's some great advice. And then you never take it. So the
Ah,
fact that you leave the space in there for them to actually be intentional to say, here's what I'm going to do and make a plan.
yeah.
Now the book doesn't just sit on the shelf afterwards. They're implementing what they've learned. So
Exactly,
it's
exactly.
awesome.
Yeah,
So
it's something to go through like time and time again as well. Like it can be a resource that, maybe supports somebody in a job loss, but maybe 5 years down the road, they realize, you know what, I don't really like what I'm doing anymore. I need to explore something new. My book supports those individuals as well. So it really helps like two pockets of individuals who are in
right,
transition, those that have been restructured and need to find something fast, but also individuals who maybe can take a bit more time to explore a new path.
right, right. It's great. So what's next? What lies ahead for you now that you've
Ah,
launched the book? You've got your coaching. What do you have else up your sleeve?
absolutely. So one of the things that I have been working on, and will be launching, I've developed and will be launching on a new platform actually in the next month, is an online course. And so what I see coming forward is not just one course. I mean, I think in a career transition, like in that strategy plan, there's a lot of mini courses that can go with that as well.
Yeah,
So I want to make these learnings as accessible as possible. I recognize that not everybody has the ability to work one on one with a coach, but certainly through my courses, I want to be able to share lots of knowledge, lots of like activities and things that you can do to make your
yeah,
job search, bring your strategy to life. And so I plan to have like some sub courses, like one devoted just to interviewing and one devoted just to creating your networking strategy, so that you're reaching out to the right people. So I plan to have some mini courses, but the first one I'm going to launch is like I call it Job Search Complete. It's like A to Z, parlaying off of the book. Actually, you get a free copy of the book with the course when I launch it,
yeah.
and 30 minutes with me. So that's coming. But it just gives people a chance to really put things into action.
Yeah, love it. And it's another way for people to get to know you and your voice as well, right? I know
Absolutely.
I've had lots of people that have read my book and then that's it.
Yeah.
That's all they need. They go off and they implement and right.
Hmm.
But then there's some that go from there to now they take my course. And
Yeah.
then some of them, that's all they need. And then some of them
Yeah.
go from reading my book to taking my course to booking a coaching call with me because they
Yeah.
feel now like they've already know me, they trust me. So I'm assuming
Exactly.
you'll find the same with your audience. So
I think so. And I just really believe in giving people options. So to
yeah,
have a number of different avenues where individuals can get support. I mean, one thing I know, I mean, you're active on LinkedIn, Dennis, so you're seeing, a lot of what I'm seeing too, which is there's a lot of job loss out there. There's many posts from people saying,
yeah,
I need help. Can you connect me with people? So, being able to share resources that can help people in a very vulnerable time is something I believe very strongly in. So,
Yeah.
so to be able to give them avenues. So, LinkedIn, you might get some inspiration from me on LinkedIn. Buy the book, you're going to get a lot of information and strategy. Book a call with me, you're going to get a little bit more. And actually, I offer a complimentary 30-minute, just conversation for
Yeah.
anybody who's in a job search looking to explore and maybe, struggling and just needing some fresh ideas or a new perspective. That's something that I do offer as well.
So let's talk about that. How can people connect with you? Where do they find your book? How do they book a call with you?
So the one-stop shop would be my website, which is mschafercoaching.ca. And I know the information will be in the show notes after just to
Yes.
guide people. So
Yeah.
that's one place where you can learn about my services. You can not only buy my book, which is available on Amazon as well, but you can get a free chapter to the book. So if you're not really sold on buying it just yet and you want to try before you buy, you can get a free downloadable chapter of my book, and then you can buy the whole thing also on my website. I also offer, a reflection tool, which that will be in the show notes as well. That's a freebie too, that is through my website that will give you some clarity on those keys to career fulfillment that I mentioned earlier. The work that gives you energy, the kind of organization that believes what you believe in, and your non-negotiables, among other things. So there's a few different things, and of course, booking a call with me you can do on my website as well. Just click on the Contact Us button, and you'll be taken to my calendar. You can book a spot with me directly there.
Beautiful. So connect with Michelle on LinkedIn. We'll put your profile link in there.
Yeah.
Find her book, her on the website. We'll put those in the show notes. And yeah, if you're in this spot where you've just been laid off or you're thinking about a career change, Michelle is the person to get in touch with. So, Michelle, thank you. Thank you for sharing your
Thank you.
story. Thank you for your encouragement to others who may be in a similar path to you. And yeah, I hope a ton of people get a ton of value from this.
Thank you so much for having me, Dennis. And just to, for everybody to know that, these accidents that happen in life, that they can lead to somewhere really interesting and powerful. So there's lots of hope in there.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning into the Happy Accidents podcast. I hope you find these stories as intriguing and insightful as I do. But make sure you don't miss an episode. You can subscribe to my Accidental Solopreneur channel on YouTube and watch these episodes in video form, or subscribe to the Happy Accidents podcast on Apple and Spotify for your listening pleasure. Until next time, stay lucky, my friends.